Welcome back to Impactful Conversations. My name is Andy Vaughn. I serve as president and CEO of Alliant University. And with me today is a very special guest, our director of financial aid, Deb Spindler. Now, how many years, Deb, has it been at Alliant?
22.
22 years. Well, congratulations on that. That's a big milestone. And thank you for what you do for our students and for the last 22 years of Alliant University. We appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So a few things are going on in higher ed this year. 2025 and 2026 are really a lot of changes in federal policy. I just had the recent wonderful opportunity of serving as one of three federal negotiators for the One Big Beautiful Bill known as OBBB. That bill is taking legislation and moving that into regulation for higher education for new regulations that go into effect on July 1st of 2026. There's a lot of questions around financial aid. And today we're talking to Deb Spindler about the impact that may or may not have on Alliant students. We have a lot of good news to share, but the devil's in the detail. There's a lot of nuances that we talked about at the table. I had the opportunity over the last 5 weeks to serve as a federal negotiator. 2 of those weeks were in person in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Education headquarters. The biggest question I always get asked is, but I thought there was a government shutdown during that time. Yes, there was. But the White House Office of Management and Budget, known as OMB, decided that we were actually supposed to continue this work in spite of the shutdown. So we were designated as essential. First time in my life that I've been called essential. So I was very proud to wear that badge. And we continued the work and came to consensus. Consensus for regulation development requires a unanimous vote of 10 negotiators, and we did receive that. So today we're going to focus on the financial aid implications of what the One Big Beautiful Bill changes for graduate level education, when those go into effect, who it's not impacting, who it may impact. But again, we're going to preface everything we say today with contact Deb or your financial aid representative at Alliant to make sure that your specific situation is taken care of, because everyone has a different background, different limits, different debt they might bring in, and different rules. So let's dive in. So the biggest one is Grad PLUS. The Graduate PLUS loan was established about 20 years ago by the federal government to be a supplemental loan on top of Stafford Direct. And for graduate level education, Grad PLUS is often used as what I would term as a top-up loan. There are certain programs that you can't work full-time: medical doctor, dental, osteopathy, clinical psychology, and others. These are programs that require 3 or 4, sometimes more years of full-time dedication as a student. And in those programs, Grad PLUS has typically been used for living expenses while you're in school full-time. So Deb, maybe you can walk us through, from your view, the changes on Grad PLUS, but also the good news in the legacy program for current students, and walk us through some of those changes.
Yeah. So the changes are that starting as of any students that begin after July 1st, 2026, into a new program will not be eligible for Grad PLUS, even if they're a graduate student. For the continuing students that are continuing in their program throughout time, they will be able to be considered what's called legacy. And that means that they will still have access to the Grad PLUS until 2029 or until their program is to officially be done. So it does allow those students that start before July 1st the chance to even get loans if they start in the summer of 2026. And so that is a good thing, or even in the spring of 2026. So if they're in the program at the time as of July 1st and have had a disbursement, we can actually allow them to carry on to get Grad PLUS and get the current rate of amounts.
That's a keynote, disbursement. So this was a big topic at our table at the Department of Education headquarters in negotiation, and that the original language said the loan was made, but they clarified that to say to be in the legacy program, which takes you through with Grad PLUS through June of 29, or until your expected date of completion, whichever comes first, that you have to have a loan dispersed by June 30th at midnight that night. And that's really important because we want to make sure that for those that are eligible to keep the Grad PLUS eligibility through the next 3 or 4 years, You have to follow the rules. Another victory we got at negotiation, and we're going to figure out what the final rule is when that's published in 26. But the department said if a student takes a term off, they might get kicked out of legacy. But we negotiated with the department in good faith that an approved leave of absence would actually keep them in the legacy program. Details on that we can't give yet because the department hasn't published the final rule, but that should be in the final rule just to let everybody know. And that's good news too.
Yes, that's excellent news because it does allow students that have emergencies while they're attending school and that may have to take off a semester that they can actually come back and still be considered legacy.
That's right. That's right. So bottom line is for Grad PLUS, if you are an active student and you've received some sort of federal loan, whether Stafford or Grad PLUS, prior to June 30th of 2026, you can actually keep your full access to Grad PLUS through June 30th of 2029 or until your program's expected date of completion, whichever comes first. Okay. So for active students, keep that in mind. For students considering starting a program in 2026, you might want to weigh this into your timing decision on when you start, because if you start classes before July 1st of 2026, you're probably going to have a better funding option for your program. Makes sense probably to start prior to July 1st if you're on the fence. Let's turn our attention to direct Stafford loans. This was the biggest part of negotiated rulemaking in the last 2 months. We spent a lot of time on this topic, and that is a new rule from OBBB called the Professional versus Graduate Designation for Stafford Direct. The federal government, bottom line, is trying to get accreditors and colleges to work together to lower the tuition or at least freeze tuition. That's, if you want to know the why behind these new rules, that's it right there. And we believe in that at Alliant too. I agree with the actions the department is taking to try to understand how do we not have college tuitions rise at the pace they have in the last 50 years. Alliant believes in that too. Most of our programs are priced in the lower part of the competitive analysis that we do. So we believe in lower tuition. We absolutely do. So let's talk about the changes to Stafford Direct. Let's talk about legacy first, because that's the active students or students that start a program before July 1st. They have the same thing Grad PLUS has, access to these loans at the prior caps, including the top-up money if you're a clinical psychology student with Federal Direct Stafford. As long as you're in the legacy program, you're pretty good like Grad PLUS. Maybe explain that one first for legacy.
Yes. For legacy, for most graduate students and most doctoral graduate students, they're eligible for a maximum of $20,500 per academic year. And that gets a little more technical. But they have a maximum that can borrow over their lifetime of $138,500. For the doctoral students in clinical psychology, they were eligible to borrow $33,000 per academic year, up to a maximum of $224,000. So quite a bit more. And so if you're in the legacy, you're still going to be able to get those amounts.
I have good news on that too, because originally at the negotiation table, the department did not believe that extra top-up money for designated health programs, and there's 12 programs, clinical psych is one of them on the list, would continue. They actually were going to extinguish that as of next year with no legacy. The negotiators didn't like that. And we talked through that several days with the department. And at the end, the department agreed they would issue a Dear Colleague letter. That's technical for the higher ed part. Students don't need to worry about that. But they would issue a DCL. But that top-up money would actually be a part of the legacy program too. That is excellent news if you are an active student in an eligible program, or you start a program between now and July 1st of 2026, you'll have access to that legacy higher loan limit too for the next few years. And that's certainly great news. So we negotiated that. That was a really big victory that week. It was. Okay, so that's legacy. Now let's talk about changes for new students. If you start a program after July 1st of 2026, this is only for new students after July. If you're a current student, legacy, we're focusing now on new post-July of 2026. What changes for them on Stafford? And let's talk about the designation professional for clinical psychology in the same conversation.
There are certain programs, as you've mentioned, that were classified as professional. With the negotiated rulemaking, luckily we were able to have the clinical psychology, PsyD, and PhD added to that list. So that means that those students are eligible to borrow more on a per academic year basis and more as a lifetime basis. Most graduate students and other doctoral programs only are, I shouldn't say only, are able to borrow 20,500 still, which they were before. But the maximum they can borrow as a graduate student is 100,000. For the professional students, they're able to borrow 50,000 per academic year, and they get 200,000 as a lifetime maximum.
So any program designated professional gets the 200 graduate level cap, not including undergraduate debt, by the way. This is a really important distinction, though. I don't think it's gotten enough media attention. The 200,000 cap for professional programs is for graduate programs. Your undergraduate debt doesn't take any of that money away. But if you come in with a master's degree and you have debt, federal debt, it does make that 200 less equal to that same debt from your master's degree, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's really important. So let's say you did a master's in therapy and you took out 30,000 for that loan. Your cap on a professional designation graduate program would not be 200, it'd be 170.
Correct. If you have already previously borrowed, we take the 200,000, we subtract what you've borrowed as a graduate student previously, and that is what allows us to lend up to a maximum.
But your undergraduate debt does not play into that.
Correct. And that is different from what it is in the past because they used to lump those together in the total.
There's also, though, including undergraduate debt, a new lifetime aggregate cap, and I think it's mid 200s somewhere. I don't have the exact number, but again, talk to financial aid about your situation.
It comes to the 200 plus the 57.5 that the undergrad.
So about 257 is the cap lifetime. Okay. And very, very few people hit that cap, but it's important to bring up because it is a new rule. So on the graduate level designation, the cap is 100,000. 20,500 per academic year.
Correct.
Professional designation, which includes now clinical psychology plus 10 programs, is 50,000 a year, 200 cap. Walk us through what a student should do, because this can be very confusing, overwhelming. I lived it for 5 weeks, so I know how tiring it can be. What should a student do to figure out their financial aid package and what's right for them?
Well, one of the first things to do is right now the 26-27 FAFSA is available to apply. So go out to student aid and fill that out. If you plan on starting before July 1st, you will need to also fill out the 25-26 FAFSA if you have not already done so. If you have done so and you plan on coming to Alliant, make certain that our school code is listed on the form. The other thing that I would do to be prepared for what you might be eligible for is to look at what you've borrowed. And you can do that through NSLDS, National Student Loan Data System. All students have access. You can go to studentaid.gov and go directly into your account and see what you've borrowed as a graduate and as an undergraduate student to see what your total maximum is. And then you can go from there. And the other thing is also to think about your budget ahead of time before you come to school. Think about what are the wants, what are the needs, what is it that you really need to live on to determine how much you might have to borrow.
Excellent. A couple final comments. The final rule for this new regulation on Title IV will not be published till as late as June 1st of 2026, with an effective date of July 1st. Typically, when the notice of rulemaking is published, and that should be published in January, that's pretty close to what the final rule will be, but the department won't have that final rule for these new loan limits until as late as June of 2026. For students that start after July 1st, they're going to be kind of technically not, but in limbo on what is their financial aid package going to be. So let's just take a scenario. Let's say someone wants to start classes in September of 2026, and they fill out the FAFSA, and there's no final rule yet. What does financial aid do for that student as we wait for the final rule to be published?
Unfortunately, we normally have to go with whatever was decided. And we go by, what is it they call it? The rule of the law. So if they said at that time that these are what the maximums are, that is what we're going to go by before they actually print anything. And unfortunately and financially, we're quite used to that. So it's nothing new.
Okay. Bottom line is seek your financial aid advisor. Remember, every situation is different. So, what we talked about today is more abstract, general in nature. These are big regulations that impact literally 18 million college students in the United States. Remember, your situation is entirely different from the next person. The only way you can get the true, accurate information for your situation is to contact your Alliant financial aid representative. So, what is that phone number and email address? And even prospective students are invited to contact our financial aid team to walk you through these examples.
The phone number is 858-635-4700. Very simple. And the email address is sf@alliant.edu.
So that's SF as in student finance, correct? At alliant.edu. Deb, final comments about these major changes. We haven't seen this many changes to Title IV in a couple of decades. What are your thoughts?
Well, we always knew they were going to come. We've been hearing for years that things were going to change. It's just it was not all at once that we expected it to happen. So that's the one thing that's different. But we're financial aid. We roll with it. We want to take care of our students. And so we'll give them the best advice that we can based on their own personal situations.
Well, very good. Well, we're very pleased to have you at Alliant and your whole team. We thank you for what you do, and our students do as well. We're here to help everybody. And this has been another edition of Impactful Conversations. My guest has been Deb Spindler, the Director of Financial Aid at Alliant University. Deb, thank you.